Speaker, unlike the previous speaker, I actually want to address the Prime Minister's speech and say a few words about it. Well, I'm fortunate if I missed the first half, because if the second half's anything to go by, sir, then the rest of it wouldn't have been a ripper. But, Mr Speaker, I want to point to three areas in the Prime Minister's address where this government is just getting it wrong, and where, as a result, New Zealand's being held back. And those areas are research and development, climate change, and energy and resources. Sir, I want to start with research and development, because Mr Keys said in his speech that science and innovation are key elements of the government's economic agenda both this year and into the future. So just how has this government demonstrated its commitment to research and development and innovation? Well, the facts are that it began by dumping $700 million worth of existing investment in innovation in the primary sector, $700 million. Then it went to cut $300 million from research and tax credits for those very purposes. And as Phil Goff reminded the House earlier today, National did this while Australia was increasing its research and development expenditure by 25%. The truth hurts, Mr Henare, but Australia was increasing its expenditure by 25%. The reason I don't move to Australia, unlike a whole lot of your rich Tory mates, Mr Henare, is because I'm proud of this country and I want to see it do well. And I don't believe, unlike members opposite, in this Crosby-Textor strapline that we need to catch up with Australia, because that's all it is. That's all it is, and members opposite know it. And if members opposite need more evidence than this, that it's just a Crosby-Textor strapline, then here it is. Under Labor governments in Australia, Australia is investing in these key areas while National just pays lip service to them. I was at the UN Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen in December, and I saw more evidence of this lip service being paid to goals, Mr Speaker. When it became apparent at that conference that progress wasn't as good as it should be, guess what happened? Tim Grosser called a press conference. He called a press conference to announce what he called the Global Agriculture Fund, which he said was a cooperative mechanism between countries to look for solutions to greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. Well, Mr Speaker, what I'd like the House to do is take a moment to compare the Global Agriculture Fund, or GAF for short, with Labor's initiative in this area, the Fast Forward Fund. The Fast Forward Fund, which was announced in March 2009, saw the New Zealand government commit $700 million to that fund. And one of its purposes was to create new technologies to reduce agricultural emissions. After including earnings, well, just wait, Mr Carter, because I'll get to that. After including earnings from interest, the $700 million contribution from the government would likely have reached $1 billion over the planned term of the fund, and then matched with the funding from pastoral and food sector industries. That PPP would have reached $2 billion investment in primary production-based intellectual property. And guess what? Well, the Minister thinks it's funny, but that IP would have been owned by Kiwis onshore to make a difference to what matters to our national interest here. That IP would in all likelihood have seen us reach some solutions about emissions reduction technology, and that would have been to the benefit of our own emissions profile and the enhancement of our international reputation. Well, that Minister doesn't care about our international reputation, but members on this side of the House are absolutely passionate about it. And it would also have allowed us to exploit the technology developed commercially on the basis of that fund at potentially significant profit. And if we decided not to sell it offshore at profit to our national economy, then we could have given some of it away in aid to developing food-producing countries. What a great solution. What a win-win. $2 billion worth of investment owned onshore, able to be directed by Kiwis for Kiwi benefit. What could be better than that? Well, you would wonder, wouldn't you? Well, it was a flop, Mr Carter, because National scrapped it shortly after it came into office, along with the tax credits for research and development. After confirming the GAF funding at the time of Tim Gross's announcement, which we find is around $200 million, it just pales in comparison to the $2 billion that would have been available under the Fast Forward Fund. And worse, the multinational nature of GAF will inevitably mean that New Zealand won't own the results of any of the research paid for by it. So as well as there being substantially less money for investment in the reduction of agriculture emissions, New Zealand will be poorer because we lose the opportunity to sell or share emissions reduction technology in our own singular area of expertise on our own terms. This, Mr. Speaker, is National's commitment to research and development in a key area for New Zealand, reducing our agricultural emissions so we can do our bit on climate change. Divide the assistance that would have been made available by a factor of 10, and then make sure that New Zealand can't control the outcomes of the research. That's National's answer on R&D, and it makes a mockery of what we heard from the Prime Minister earlier. Let's turn to what John Key said about unlocking New Zealand's resources, and let's consider what he actually said. The Prime Minister confirmed that areas will be removed from Schedule 4 of the Crown Minerals Act to allow for mining, and that's a direct quote. Today he made it clear that whenever we hear the expression unlocking New Zealand's resources, he means mining our national parks. What did he really do? He confirmed that National has no forward-looking plan for New Zealand's future. Was there any mention of our renewables advantage? Where was John Key, who happens to be the Minister for Tourism, celebrating the 100% pure brand? Why was there a complete absence of any discussion of the possibilities of clean technology investment and all the jobs that they can create? Where is the vision beyond Jerry Brownlee's desire just to dig things up and send them offshore to be burned? Mr. Speaker, Philip Mills, Lloyd Morrison, George Fistenich, Jeff Ross, Stephen Tindall, Rob Fennick, Rob Fife and Jeremy Moon wrote to MPs last week about these possibilities. They included this book, The Clean Industrial Revolution, with their letter, and I want to place my thanks on record for their correspondence. These people are some of our country's leading businessmen, and they remind us that New Zealand's future should be focused on sustainable growth. They remind us that sustainable growth is not achieved by focusing on economic goals over environmental and social outcomes. Sustainable growth requires an integrated policy that merges economic, environmental and social outcomes, the famous triple bottom line, to ensure that the needs of the present are met without compromising the prosperity and quality of life of future generations. Mr. Speaker, mining national parks and other high-value conservation land completely ignores environmental and conservation concerns and the benefits that New Zealanders derive from activities in our national parks and on the conservation estate. Areas included within Schedule 4 have been identified as having high conservation value. That's why Schedule 4 protects this land by preventing access for mining. Going down the path that John Key mapped for us today undermines New Zealand brand as clean as green. Well, Ms Gowdy was out with her chainsaw in the mangrove swaps in the Coromandel. We all know that, and she's proud of it. Look at her holding her arms up there with glee. But that's what New Zealand needs to look at if they want to see the future of the environment under a John Key national government. And I'm afraid it's not pretty, sir. This endangers New Zealand's tourism industry. It undermines our future. What a tragedy, what a total tragedy that after only a year in office, Paula Bennett and her ministerial colleagues have got so arrogant that they're not interested in listening to New Zealand's leading business people, the names that I mentioned earlier, who are trying to show a way forward where we can have it all for the future, and the National Party just doesn't want to know. Sir, my commitment as a Labour spokesperson in these areas is that the next Labour-led government will not be deaf to the jobs-rich vision that these people have articulated for us. In fact, they know that this is the way to a clean and prosperous future. And Mr. Speaker, Labour will embrace that future.